So today we're going to compare two numbers in different bases, but before we do that, we're going to review our base 10 to make sure that we're all on the same page. So when we are doing base 10, that means after we have 10 in each spot, we regroup and move to the next spot. So if we had 10 ones, we could regroup those and move it over to our 10 spot and exchange it for one long. One long represents the 10 ones. After that, we would have 10 in the 10 spot. So if we have 10 in the 10 spot, we can take those, regroup them into our hundreds, and we would have one flat. So we have that. And so a way of showing this is with the use of exponents. So we know that we're in base 10, so we're going to have 10 to the 0 power, 10 to the 1 power, 10 to the second power, which is 10 squared, and 10 to the third power, which is 10 cubed. And so that represents our ones, our tens, our hundreds, and then our thousands. So real quick for an example, I'm just going to plug in 5 in all of these situations. So if we had 5 in our 1 spot, we would take 10 to the 0 power, which represents 1, and we take 1 times 5. So we just have 1 times 5, and that gives us 5. So we know that place value is worth 5. If we had 5 longs, which we already said each long has 10 ones in it, we would have 10 to the first power, which is 10 times 1. 10 times 1 gives us 10, and then we have to take that answer times the amount that we have in our spot. So we have 10 times 5 equals 50. So this place value, this amount, represents 50, which we also know by because we could count 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And then same with our hundreds. If we have our hundreds, we have 5 of them. We have 10 to the second power, which represents 10 times 10. That gives us 100. So then we take 100 times the 5 that we have, and we get 500. Then if I were to add up all of these numbers, 500 plus 50 and 5, we would get 555. So using that knowledge, we are going to compare numbers in different bases using this exact same method. So the two numbers that we are going to compare today is 362 base 8 and 14345 base 5. So like we said earlier, when we're working in a base, that just means after we have that many in a group, we exchange and move on to the next group. So in this situation, every group can have 8, just like in base 10, each group can have 10 and then move on over. So we're going to write our exponents above the numbers so that we know what we're doing. So we have 8 to the 0, 8 to the 1, and then 8 to the second power. So we represented the 0 power as just 1. So we have 8 to the 0 power represents 1. So we have 1 times 2, which is going to give us 2. And then we have 8 to the first power, which is 8 times 1. And that represents 8, and 8 times 4 is, or 8 times 6 is 48. And then we have 8 to the squared, which represents 8 times 8, and 8 times 8 is 64, and 64 times 3 for the amount in that place value is 192. So we are going to add up these three numbers. Oops. So we get 242 base 10 because we converted it into our base 10 number using the same system. So over here we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to put my exponents above all of the numbers. And then I'm going to work it. So 5 to the 0 power represents 1. 1 times 4 is 4. 5 to the first power is 5 times 1. 5 times 1 times the 3 in the place value gives us 15. We have 5 to the square, which represents 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25, and I know 25 times 4, the amount in that place value, is 100. And then 5 cubed is 1 more than we ever did over here, so we're going to have 5 times 5 is 25, times 1 more 5, which would give us the answer of 125. We only have to do it once because we only have 1 in that place value, so we're going to add 125. When we add up these numbers, we are going to get 244 base 10. So now that we have our two numbers, we can represent this in a few different ways. One of the ways we're going to talk about is our number line. We're going to have 250 on this end, 240 on this end, because we know both of those numbers fall between those. So we'll have 245 in the middle, and we'll add our 1 spots in there. So we know 242 would fall right here, because it's 2 more than 240, and 244 is 1 less than 245, so it would represent right there. And we know that the number furthest to the right on the number line is the biggest number. So we know that 244 base 10 is bigger than 242 base 10. So we can write these in a few different ways. We can say that 242 base 10 is not equal to 244 base 10. Or we can rewrite it and say 362 base 8 is less than 1434 base 5.